My sister destroyed my engagement out of pure jealousy. Not because she wanted my fiancé, but because she couldn't have the man she actually loved. And she decided if she couldn't be happy, neither could I. Hang tight as I tell you everything that happened. This is my story, and it's one I never thought I'd share so openly. I'm Amara Ihanacho, 28, a nurse living in Atlanta, completely in love with Darius Cole, my fiancé. Darius is kind, funny, and the kind of man you think only exists in dreams. Our life felt perfect, and we were planning a wedding that I thought would be full of joy. But there was one person who quietly watched from the sidelines. My older sister, Nneka. She's 30, sharp, and always had this way of seeming supportive while hiding something underneath. Growing up, Nneka and I were inseparable. We laughed, we fought, we shared secrets. But ever since her breakup with Eli, her longtime boyfriend, something changed. The warmth that used to define her presence turned cold. She started making subtle comments, small jabs about how perfect my life was, how quickly Darius and I were moving forward. I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to her heartbreak, wanting to give her space to heal. But the tension lingered, an unspoken weight in every room she entered. I remember one evening at a small family dinner, she raised her glass and toasted me, her voice calm, polite, to Amara and her perfect luck. I smiled politely, but inside, a strange chill ran down my spine. Darius noticed too. Later that night, he pulled me aside, his expression serious. Amara, there's something off about the way Nneka looks at us, he said. I wanted to brush it off, but the unease had already rooted itself in my chest. The next few weeks were a blur of mixed emotions. Nneka would volunteer to help with wedding plans, sitting close to Darius, laughing at his jokes a little too warmly. I told myself I was overthinking, that it was normal for sisters to be involved. But there were moments, quick glances, fleeting smiles, an intensity one couldn't place, that made my heart skip nervously. I couldn't shake the feeling that beneath her polite demeanor, something darker was brewing. Little did I know, the seeds of betrayal were already being planted. A sister I had trusted with my entire heart was slowly setting into motion a plan that would tear my engagement apart. And I wouldn't see it coming until it was too late. It's hard to write this without feeling every pang of the heartbreak all over again. But this is how it all began. A perfect life slowly shadowed by the quiet jealousy of someone I loved most. Planning the wedding with Darius felt like living in a dream. Every detail, every choice, every little celebration made me feel like the luckiest woman alive. Darius was by my side through it all, always calm, always supportive, always making me laugh even when the stress of planning started to weigh me down. But there was one presence that made that dream feel a little heavier. My sister Nneka. At first, she seemed genuinely helpful. She offered to come with me to dress fittings, helped pick flowers, and even gave her opinions on the invitations. I was grateful, thinking she was excited for me. But soon, I noticed the little comments, the kind that could be dismissed if you didn't pay attention. "Oh, you're moving so fast," she'd say casually. "Not everyone gets their perfect love story so quickly." Or, "Wow, everything always seems to work out for you, huh?" Her words were sugar-coated, but the sting underneath was unmistakable. As I thought about it more, memories of our childhood came rushing back. Nneka always seemed to live in my shadow. I was the one teachers praised, the one friends gravitated toward, the one our parents cheered for at every recital and school event. Nneka excelled too, in her own ways, but there was a quiet resentment that seemed to grow each time I succeeded. I remembered birthdays when her gifts were overlooked because mine were always bigger, brighter, more celebrated. I remembered family gatherings where her accomplishments were politely acknowledged while mine were praised loudly. Back then, I told myself it was normal sibling rivalry, but now, as an adult, I could see the roots of something much deeper. At one family dinner, it hit me again. Nneka raised her glass and, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, said, "To Amara and her perfect luck." The words were polite, but the venom was clear. She had mastered the art of disguise, the voice of sisterly affection hiding a sharp edge. I smiled and clinked my glass, forcing myself to appear cheerful, but inside, a knot of unease twisted in my stomach. Later that night, Darius took my hand in his brows furrowed. "Amara, there's something off about the way your sister looks at us," he said softly. I wanted to believe I was imagining it, but I couldn't ignore the truth in his eyes. There was something in Nneka's gaze, a mixture of bitterness, longing, and envy. As our wedding plans continued, her comments grew sharper, more frequent. I tried to brush them off, telling myself that she was still hurting from her breakup with Eli, that jealousy was natural sometimes. But deep down, I knew this wasn't ordinary sibling rivalry. Something inside her had rotted, a quiet bitterness that was waiting for the perfect moment to surface. And the more I smiled, the more perfect our life appeared, the more I unknowingly fed the fire of her envy. I began to feel it everywhere, in her laughter, in her glances, in the way she lingered near Darius. The dream I was living, the love I cherished, was slowly becoming shadowed by a quiet, invisible threat I could sense but didn't yet understand. It was late one Friday night when I heard a knock on my apartment door. I opened it to find Nneka swaying slightly, a bottle in her hand and tears streaking her face. "Amara, I can't stop thinking about him," she slurred, her voice breaking. I guided her inside, gently closing the door behind her. She collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. "I'm still in love with Eli," she admitted, barely above a whisper. "But he's getting married to someone else. It's not fair. Love is cruel, Amara. Nobody deserves happiness when your heart's dead." Her words cut through me in a strange way. I wanted to be angry, to tell her to get a grip, but instead, I felt this deep, sisterly compassion. I had always been the one to comfort her, to patch her wounds when life hurt her, and tonight was no different. I sat beside her, letting her cry on my shoulder, murmuring that she deserved happiness too, that the world hadn't given her what she wanted yet, but it could still offer her love. She clung to me, trembling, and for a moment, I thought this was just another heartbreak I could soothe. I had no idea that this night, this confession, would mark the beginning of something that would unravel the life I thought was untouchable. The following week, Nneka began to appear more often around Darius, always with some excuse. "I'll help with the wedding invitations," she'd say. "I can drop by to organize the seating charts." At first, I thought it was sweet of her to want to be involved. I even smiled when she helped Darius carry boxes of decorations into the apartment. It felt like my sister was finally finding her place in our happiness, supporting us in her own way. But soon, I started noticing little things. The way she lingered a little too long when Darius smiled at her. The way she laughed a fraction too heartily at his jokes. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself I was overreacting, that Nneka had always been affectionate and playful. Yet, the seed of unease had been planted in my mind, growing quietly. I remember one evening, as I made dinner, glancing into the living room and seeing Nneka sitting close to Darius, leaning in to hear him better, her hand brushing against his casually. I forced a smile, telling myself I was imagining things, that sisters were allowed to be close. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Nneka was no longer just my sister. She was a force quietly testing the boundaries of my perfect life. Every small interaction now carried an undercurrent of tension I couldn't yet define. I wanted to trust her, to believe her presence meant support, but an uneasy knot had formed in my chest. Something subtle had begun, like a shadow stretching slowly across the bright life I had with Darius. And I didn't know it yet, but Nneka's heartbreak was no longer just about her lost love. It was about creating chaos where there had once been joy. At first, it was so subtle that I barely noticed. Nneka's words were always casual, like passing remarks, but they carried a weight I couldn't see at the time. One evening, she lingered by the kitchen while Darius and I talked about wedding plans. "You know," she said, twirling a strand of her hair, "people move too fast sometimes. I mean, do you really know him? Are you sure he hasn't been with someone else before?" I laughed it off, assuming she was joking, but Darius's expression shifted, just for a moment. Then came the little hints aimed at him. Nneka would casually mention things like, "I heard stories people say some brides rush into marriages when they're hiding something." Or, "Darius, you know Amara's finances have always been complicated, right?" He would furrow his brow, trying to process what she said, and I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. I tried to reassure him, but her words had already planted tiny seeds of uncertainty that kept growing. At the same time, Nneka began whispering her own poisonous doubts to me. "Are you sure Darius is serious?" she asked one evening over coffee. "I mean, I heard he still talks to his ex sometimes. You know, men like that, they have wandering eyes." My stomach twisted. I had never questioned him, never imagined that Darius could betray me. But now, in the quiet of her confidence, I felt this strange hesitation creeping into my thoughts. Arguments that never existed before began to emerge, sparked by fragments of conversation that always seemed to trace back to her. A casual misunderstanding over text messages became a huge fight after Nneka had helpfully pointed out a tone that could be interpreted as flirtatious. A disagreement about a vendor spiraled into hours of tension because she had suggested, ever so subtly, that I was being careless with money. Every time Darius and I argued, I replayed the moments in my head, trying to figure out how we ended up in these fights. And slowly, the truth began to dawn on me. Nneka was the common thread. Her smile, so innocent and supportive, masked a quiet manipulation. She was guiding both of us toward suspicion, mistrust, and frustration, all without ever appearing directly involved. I started feeling trapped in my own life, unsure of how much of my perfect engagement was real and how much had been poisoned by her words. The love I shared with Darius, once so unshakable, began to feel fragile, like glass under pressure. I questioned myself constantly, wondering if maybe there was truth in the seeds of doubt she had planted. It was a slow, creeping betrayal, the kind that doesn't announce itself with thunder but with whispers, smiles, and the quiet twisting of reality. And I couldn't see it clearly yet. How much of my happiness had already been compromised by someone I trusted more than anyone. The very foundation of my engagement was cracking, piece by piece, and Nneka was at the center, orchestrating it all with the subtle precision of a storm gathering silently on the horizon. That night started like any other. I had cooked Darius's favorite meal, set the table, lit the candles, and waited. But the minutes ticked by, and he never came. My phone buzzed once, a message from him. "Sorry, stuck at work. Won't make it tonight." I tried to shrug it off, thinking it was just a long day, but a strange unease settled over me. Later, I grabbed my laptop to distract myself and noticed Darius had left it open. My curiosity got the better of me, and I found a string of messages I wasn't meant to see. My heart stopped. There it was, conversations between him and Nneka, filled with flirtatious banter, jokes only lovers would share, and confessions that made my stomach twist. "I miss you," one message read. "I can't stop thinking about you," another. Every word burned like acid in my chest. I confronted Darius immediately. His eyes were wide, desperate, pleading. "Amara, it's not what it looks like," he exclaimed. "She messaged me first. I didn't want this to happen." I could see the panic in his face, the sincerity, but it didn't erase the sting of betrayal. I wanted to believe him, to trust that our love was still intact, but the evidence was overwhelming. Then I reached out to Nneka. I had to hear it from her, had to see her reaction. Her face was calm, almost too calm. She denied everything with a practiced ease, shaking her head and whispering, "You're imagining things. Darius would never do that. I wouldn't do that to you." But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of satisfaction, that told me she was enjoying the chaos she had created. The fallout was immediate. Family members, who had always been part of our support system, began taking sides. Some believed me, some believed her. Tension filled every conversation, every gathering, every phone call. I felt humiliated. The one I trusted most, the one I loved, was caught in a web spun by my own sister. The engagement I had dreamed about, the life I had pictured, crumbled around me in hours. Finally, Darius and I had the painful conversation. His voice shook as he tried to explain, but the bond we shared was broken. I couldn't ignore the messages, the hidden laughter, the secret words that had been exchanged behind my back. The engagement was over. My heart felt like it had been ripped from my chest. Through it all, Nneka sat nearby during the breakup, her expression serene, almost smug. That calm, satisfied smirk burned into my memory, a constant reminder of the sister I had loved and trusted. The same sister who had quietly orchestrated the destruction of my happiness. Every glance at her face was a jolt of pain, and I realized that the betrayal wasn't just in Darius's messages, but in the careful, deliberate manipulation of someone I had always thought was on my side. The night ended with silence, broken only by my own tears. My perfect world had collapsed, and the one person who should have been my ally was standing at the center of it, smiling quietly as everything I held dear fell apart. Months passed after the breakup, and I tried to pick up the pieces of my life. I avoided Nneka as much as possible, throwing myself into work and trying to heal from the betrayal that had left me raw and exposed. But the weight of questions, the nagging sense that there was more to the story, never left me. Why had she done it? Why Darius? Why me? Then one evening, out of the blue, I ran into Eli, Nneka's ex, the man she had never stopped loving. He hesitated before speaking, a shadow of awkwardness in his eyes. "Amara, there's something you should know," he began, his voice careful. I nodded, my heart hammering. "Nneka, she told me that you were the reason she and I broke up, that you came between us." I froze, the words hitting me like a punch. I had always assumed Neka's heartbreak was her own pain to manage, that her jealousy was something buried deep. But this was a revelation. Every late-night confession, every sly comment, every small twist of doubt she planted suddenly made sense. She had lied to him, just as she had manipulated Darius, just as she had slowly dismantled the life I thought I had. It all connected in my mind. The perfect life she envied, the obsession with love she had never been able to claim, the way she had watched joy from the sidelines and decided she couldn't allow anyone else to have it either. The thought settled in my chest, cold and sharp. If she couldn't have her true love, no one else could have theirs. Every carefully constructed betrayal, every quiet, poisonous word, every manipulated glance and suggestion. It had all been intentional, methodical, driven by envy and obsession. I left that conversation with a new clarity, a spark of determination I hadn't felt before. The pain was still there, deep and raw, but it was now accompanied by understanding. Neka had underestimated me. She had assumed I would crumble, that I would beg, that I would lash out in desperation. But I realized that I didn't need dramatic revenge. I didn't need public humiliation or anger-fueled confrontation. My plan would be quiet, patient, devastating. I would let the truth unfold in its own time, gently, subtly, with precision. Neka had built her empire of lies carefully, thinking no one would ever see the cracks. I would let those cracks widen, unnoticed at first, until the structure collapsed entirely. As I walked away from Eli that night, the pieces of the past months fell into place, forming a picture I could finally understand. Neka's motives were clear, and so was my path forward. I didn't need to chase her with anger or scream in front of everyone. The sweetest victory would be one she never saw coming, a reckoning born from patience, truth, and the quiet dismantling of everything she thought she controlled. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt a sense of power returning to me. The hurt was still there, but it had transformed into purpose. I would rise from the ruins of my broken engagement, rebuild my life on my terms, and let the truth do the work that anger never could. Neka's jealousy had been loud, messy, and cruel, but I would answer it not with chaos, but with calculated, inevitable justice. After months of healing, I began to rebuild my life. The raw ache of betrayal was still there, but I refused to let it define me. I focused on my career, threw myself into my nursing work, and surrounded myself with friends who reminded me of the life I could still have. Contact with Neka was minimal. Polite messages when family events required it, brief exchanges that kept the surface calm. I wasn't ready to face her fully, and I didn't need to. Patience had become my weapon. That's when I heard about Caleb, Neka's new boyfriend. From what I gathered, he was successful, generous, and kind-hearted. The kind of man who seemed entirely unaware of the darker side of the woman he was dating. Friends mentioned his charitable work, how he treated people with respect, and how he adored Neka, oblivious to the manipulation she had woven into so many relationships before. I felt a spark of an idea forming, a plan that was careful and deliberate, born from months of quiet reflection. I started by befriending Caleb in the most innocent way possible. A casual encounter at a charity event, a shared laugh at a mutual friend's dinner party, and slowly, over time, he began to see me as trustworthy, approachable, someone who understood him without judgment. I never spoke badly of Neka. I never lied. Instead, I began to sprinkle subtle truths into conversations. Things I had kept hidden, pieces of the puzzle that revealed her true nature when seen in context. I didn't know Neka ever had such a sharp edge, I said casually one evening, as we discussed past friendships. She's always been competitive. Sometimes it's hard to tell where playfulness ends and something deeper begins. Caleb listened, nodding, but I didn't push. I let him process the information himself. I mentioned, offhandedly, events he had no reason to know, situations where Neka had subtly undermined others, moments of jealousy that had gone unnoticed by anyone except me. I framed it as reflection, not accusation, letting the weight of the truth fall gently into his mind. Over time, he began asking questions, piecing together the reality of Neka's past actions. The beauty of this approach was that it wasn't my words that destroyed her. It was her own history, slowly revealed in the right way. Every revelation came from truth. Every insight formed from careful guidance rather than force. I watched quietly as Caleb started to see the woman I had long known. Not the charming, supportive sister I pretended to admire publicly, but the manipulative, envious person who had caused so much pain. And the best part was that I never had to lie. I didn't need to dramatize, exaggerate, or manipulate. I simply let reality take its course, gently guiding him toward the truth with the same patience I had learned in my months of healing. Every seed planted, every truth revealed, was a step toward the quiet, inevitable reckoning I had promised myself. Nneka had underestimated me, and I intended to show her that some revenge is far more powerful when it is unseen, deliberate, and entirely just. It happened quietly at first. Caleb, curious and cautious, began digging into Nneka's past, piecing together the stories I had let slip naturally in conversation. He started noticing patterns, inconsistencies, and behaviors that didn't make sense. Old texts surfaced, messages that showed her manipulation of both him and me, evidence of the subtle lies she had woven into every relationship. And then he reached out to Eli, confirming the full extent of Nneka's deceit, the lies she had told him about me, the way she had twisted our histories to suit her narrative. I didn't interfere. I didn't need to. Watching from a distance, I saw the realization dawn in Caleb's eyes as he put the pieces together. The man who had adored her, defended her, and loved her unconditionally was now seeing the truth. And when he confronted her, it wasn't behind closed doors or whispered in private. He did it publicly, at a gathering where friends and family were present. "I can't be with someone who has built their life on lies," he told her, his voice steady but cold. "I trusted you, Nneka, and everything I believed about you was false." The room fell silent, all eyes on her as she stumbled for words, her confident facade cracking with every passing second. Nneka's face, usually so composed and sly, began to pale. Her hands trembled, her words faltered, and the truth of her actions hit her in a way that I had only ever imagined. I watched quietly from across the room, heart steady. I didn't need to gloat. The collapse was evident without my interference. The woman who had orchestrated so much heartbreak, who had thought herself untouchable, was finally facing the consequences of her own choices. Friends whispered, relatives exchanged glances, and judgment settled like a weight in the air. The network of people who had admired her, defended her, and trusted her began to see her for what she truly was. Nneka's reputation, carefully curated over years, crumbled in front of everyone. The pride that had driven her, the envy that had fueled her actions, now left her exposed and vulnerable. For the first time, she understood the sensation of loss that she had inflicted on others. The humiliation, the betrayal, the emptiness of being left alone with her guilt. It all mirrored the heartbreak she had caused me months ago. I felt no satisfaction in seeing her fall apart, only a quiet acknowledgement that justice, patient and precise, had done its work. And as I observed her, a strange calm filled me. I realized that revenge doesn't always need to be loud or aggressive. Sometimes, it's enough to let the truth reveal itself. Nneka had built a life around deceit, and that deceit had returned to her like a shadow she couldn't escape. She was finally tasting the isolation, the public scrutiny, the loss of trust, the very things she had wielded so carelessly against those she claimed to love. I left the room that evening with a sense of closure. I didn't celebrate her downfall, didn't gloat or mock. I simply stepped away, knowing that the balance had been restored, and that sometimes the quietest victories are the most powerful of all. The knock on my door was frantic, sharp, almost violent. I opened it to find Nneka standing there, her face flushed with anger, her eyes wild, her fists clenched as though she might strike. "Amara," she screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. "You took everything from me. You ruined my life. My happiness, my love, you took it all." I stayed calm, steady, and unflinching. I could see the chaos in her, the years of bitterness finally spilling out in a raw, uncontrolled torrent. "No," I said softly, deliberately. "You gave everything away." For a moment she froze, like my words had pierced her in a way that her fury couldn't shield her from. Then she lunged forward, shouting accusations, listing grievances, dragging old memories into the present as though piling them on me would justify her pain. Every word she spat carried the weight of years, jealousy, envy, resentment, and love twisted into anger. I didn't defend myself. I didn't argue. I let her rage unravel, watching the storm of her emotions. And slowly, her voice faltered, the fury giving way to something I hadn't seen in her before: vulnerability. The tall walls she had built over years of envy and insecurity began to crumble. I just wanted to feel special too," she confessed, collapsing into a heap of tears on my living room floor. Her voice was small, broken, desperate. The confession hit me in the chest. It wasn't just about Darius or Eli. It was about the void she had carried inside herself, the sense of invisibility that had fueled her jealousy and manipulation. I knelt beside her, not to comfort her. Not yet, but simply to witness the moment. I had lived through months of heartbreak, humiliation, and quiet revenge. I had carefully rebuilt my life, allowing truth and patience to dismantle the walls she had constructed. And now, she was facing the consequences not through anger or punishment, but through clarity, through the undeniable revelation of who she really was. "You don't need to take from others to feel special," I said gently, my voice steady. "You never did. You thought controlling love and happiness could fix your emptiness, but it only made it worse." She nodded weakly, tears streaming down her face, the reality of her actions settling in like a heavy weight she could no longer ignore. For the first time, Nneka felt what it was like to lose everything. Not just relationships, but the trust, respect, and admiration she had taken for granted. And for me, the sense of closure was profound. My revenge had never been about cruelty or humiliation. It had been about truth, patience, and the quiet unraveling of deceit. As she sat there, sobbing and small, I realized the power of letting reality do its work. The years of jealousy, of love, of pain, had erupted in a single, raw confrontation. I didn't need to shout or scheme or gloat. The reckoning had come. Nneka had faced the truth, and I had reclaimed my peace. In that moment, I understood that revenge doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's quiet, measured, and devastating, a reflection of truth that can never be ignored. And as I walked away, leaving her to process her own choices, I felt the weight of the past lift, replaced by a calm I hadn't known in months. Months passed, and life slowly began to feel lighter. The wounds left by betrayal had healed enough for me to breathe without the constant ache of anger and heartbreak. Darius was no longer a part of my life, and I didn't seek him out. I realized that moving forward didn't mean rekindling old flames or clinging to what was lost. It meant finding peace within myself, building a life that wasn't defined by others' actions or mistakes. Nneka left town quietly, her absence noticeable yet strangely relieving. I didn't gloat, didn't celebrate her departure. There was no triumph in watching her go. The victory had been quiet, internal, born from patience and truth. I had allowed reality to unfold at its own pace, and in doing so, justice had arrived without my hand ever needing to force it. In the mornings, I would sit on my balcony, the Atlanta skyline stretching before me, sipping coffee and reflecting on everything that had happened. I thought about the anger, the humiliation, and the heartbreak, and how it had felt at its peak. And then I thought about the path I had chosen, calm, deliberate, patient, and I realized that reclaiming my power didn't require cruelty. It didn't require revenge in the way people imagine. The truth itself, when wielded with clarity, had the ability to dismantle lies, expose deceit, and restore balance. I also reflected on forgiveness. I didn't think of it as forgetting. I didn't need to erase the past or pretend the betrayal never happened. Forgiveness, I understood, was about reclaiming control over my own life. It was about choosing to release the weight of resentment and refusing to let someone else's envy dictate my happiness. By forgiving, quietly, internally, I had freed myself from the toxicity that had once consumed me. As I look back on everything, I realized that life had a strange way of teaching its lessons. Nneka's jealousy, her manipulation, her obsession with love. It had tried to break me, but instead, it had shaped me into someone stronger, wiser, and more resilient. And in that growth, I found my peace. I turned to the camera in my mind, imagining I was speaking directly to anyone who had ever felt the sting of betrayal. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you love, I would say, my voice steady and calm, remember, revenge doesn't always mean destruction. Sometimes the truth is enough to burn what needs burning. And with that, I let go. The past no longer held me captive. The lies, the jealousy, the heartbreak, all of it belonged to the past, to Nneka, to a chapter that had finally closed. My life, my peace, my future. They were mine, untouched and untainted by anyone's envy or deceit. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. Do you think Amara handled her sister's betrayal the right way by staying calm and letting the truth unravel naturally? Or should she have confronted Nneka aggressively from the start? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy emotional, real-life style stories like this, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story.